Okay, we are live. Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On today's show, I have two very special guests. One is in Spain. I think John's in the UK. He may not be
Yeah, I am.
in the UK. And they just published a book this year. This is 2026, August. But it was published, I think, last month. And the full title, you'll see this if you're watching this on YouTube, X, Rumble, or now Substack. Full title is One Giant Lie to Mankind. The Untold Story of the Apollo Missions, and I read through it this morning. It's a very well-written book. The fit and finish is excellent as well, but it's 447 pages, I think, and really fantastic. A lot of background, a lot of information I hadn't seen before. He mentions Bart Sibrel. I've had him on my show twice. Different take on this story Bart had, more of a personal story of his involvement, but they also mentioned the great Dave McGowan, who I've posted at his shows and been on shows with him. But these are important backgrounds. But John and I have done, this will be our sixth show. We did a lot of shows back in 2019. We covered JFK, a very British coup. We also covered the Soham child murders. And then he has two great books, The Falsification of History and The Falsification of Science. And actually, The Falsification of History is also his website. So I'll put the link to it, falsification of history, all one word, .co.uk. So I'll put a link to that. And then we also sat down in 2022 with Shannon Rowan, who I've been in contact with. I think I've done 3 shows with her, but we covered their book, Welcome to the Masquerade, Prelude to the Great Reset. And that was 2022, but we're talking the pre-show, how time is flying. But this is an excellent book. There's a lot going on. There's a lot to discuss about the genesis of the book and the background and the history leading up to these Apollo missions that they talk about, but they can talk about that. So Alastair Neal and John Hamer, welcome to the show.
Thanks, William. Good to be back.
Awesome. So for people who hadn't heard your name or maybe not be familiar with either of you, maybe you could just do a brief recap of your writing careers, how you kind of synced up to write this book, and then the research that went into One Giant Lie to Mankind.
Okay, shall I say about my background and my history of writing, etc., research, and then if Alastair wants to talk about how we hooked up because he instigated it, that kind of balances it out a little bit, if that's all right. Okay, is that all right with you, Alastair?
Yeah, that's great.
Yep. Okay, yeah, well, as it says on the screen there, my name's John Hamer. I've written, this is book number 11 for me, number 12 is in the pipeline. I began doing my research into all things truth in 1997. It began with the death of Princess Diana. And, I realized very quickly that was just another one of their hoaxes. Well, I don't mean that Diana didn't die, but I mean the circumstances around which she died were another hoax. So yeah, that kind of set me down the road. And I'd always had a penchant for writing, so I began writing articles, which I sent to various websites. And I kept getting asked for more and more. And then one day somebody said to me, you should write a book. So I wrote a book called The Falsification of History, which was my first one. And that took me about 2 years to write it, but it was published in 2012. And ever since then, I've been reasonably prolific. I'm also a public speaker. I go around the country, the UK, giving public talks on various different truth topics. And obviously, I am a full-time researcher now. So, yeah, that's the background to me.
Great. Thanks, John. And when you're not talking, if you guys would be kind enough to just mute your mics, so there's just a little bit of kind of fuzziness,
Sure.
At least coming through my mic. Alastair, and how about you? What's your background and how did you get involved in this project?
Well, my background, I've had various quite diverse careers over the years, but I started writing in 2020 about a very emotional subject, the topic, it's a global topic, of assisted suicide and the controversy around that. And my father had just passed away under similar circumstances, and I felt a huge emotion with it, so I decided to write about it, and it just turned into a book, and I built it into a fictional story, but incorporating all the facts. And I was in contact with Dignitas in Switzerland, and I learned a lot about it. And I just wanted to write a story about the family's perspective of somebody who was going to go about self-deliverance. And so that got me into writing, and I've written 2 other books since. But with regard to the Apollo missions, it's always been a passion of mine. And for 20 years, I've just gathered little bits of information here and there. And the more I researched and dug deeper and deeper, and the more I could see it was an absolute falsification. So, and I had masses of information, and I thought this has got to be out there with the public. And so when I read John's books, The Falsification of History and The Falsification of Science, I thought there's the perfect partner to write a book with. So I contacted him and asked him if he'd be interested, and we shared some ideas, and we were on the same page. So off we went.
Right. So you started writing this book, like really started only about a year or 2 ago then, is that correct?
Yeah, I think it was early 2025 we started, wasn't it, John?
And you start back, like not in the 60s with the kind of Advent or JFK, but you go all the way back and start this at an interesting point with occultist, right?
Yeah. I did some research on this quite a long time ago, some of which appears in one of my other books, Falsification of Science, I think. And I looked into the real history of NASA, not the history that they tell us is true. I mean, obviously, NASA began in about 1958, I believe it was, the late 50s anyway. But prior to that, the idea for NASA, for a national space agency in the States, was mooted in the very late 40s, the mid to late 40s, immediately after World War II anyway. And yeah, the 5 people who were involved in that were a guy by the name of Jack Parsons, who he actually initiated the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, which is obviously linked to NASA now. So there was Jack Parsons, a guy by the name of Alastair Crowley, which some people may have heard of. Him and Jack were big mates, as was L. Ron Hubbard, again, all part of the same gang, the founder of the Scientology pseudo-religion. Fourthly, a guy by the name of Walt Disney, who I think most people may have heard of. And fifthly, Werner von Braun, who was the Nazi rocket scientist that was brought to the States after World War II during the Operation Paperclip event. So yeah, those 5 people, and what all those people had in common, they were all practicing occultists and Satanists. People say to me, "Oh, come on, John, you're not serious." I absolutely am serious. I mean, what can't speak can't lie. I've done plenty of research on this, and I know that those 5 guys were involved in formulating the idea for NASA. So that just gives the people an idea of what the real background of NASA is, or was, and still is to this day. And that is, it was occultist, it was satanic, and it remains so to this day. It's also Freemasonic as well. You know, all the senior astronauts, or astronauts, you might say, were all 33rd degree Freemasons. So they're all up to their scrawny necks in the scam, basically.
It's incredible. They're all highest level Freemasons. And
yeah.
Al Crowley was too. That was just one of his many things.
Yeah,
People listen to my show, Prophet of Evil. They know it. It's really incredible too, because you mentioned Parsons and Foreman, but other member of the Suicide Squad, if you don't know this, this guy named Molina, and his son married into the Robert Maxwell family. He married one of Maxwell's daughters. And and they are at the Santa Fe Institute, very close to Epstein. So it's Epstein adjacent, if not part of the Epstein network. There's no question about it. So this kind of, I've proven that Epstein's a high level occultist too, much like these guys. Disney kind of kept it hidden for a while, but it's all kind of come out. So that's really the foundation of NASA and Pentagon. That was struck was like literally on September 11th, 1941. For people who don't know that, you can literally, that's just a basic fact. Like that's a power number going all the way to the 9/11 event. So this is what the background is of this NASA group, this massive $1 billion operation, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And so the growth of NASA is taking place after World War II and the advent of the Cold War and the nuclear bomb and this kind of thing. And so there's this kind of element of competition that led to the inception and growth of NASA. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, NASA is one huge scam. It's a huge money black hole, a money pit. Obviously, it's a lot less expensive to fake space exploration than it is to actually carry it out. And I believe that the money that they steal, and I use that word advisedly, the money that they steal from the American taxpayer every year, most of it either goes into their own personal accounts or into other black ops perpetrated by the American government.
Right. So it's just a great money laundering thing. If they're not
Absolutely.
really ever been to the moon, then it's just like one of the greatest scams ever. And
It
so,
is.
but it was made in this whole competition with space travel with the Soviets, who were making real advances. Is that correct?
Yeah, the Soviets were way ahead in the space race on every single element, and the even the first man in space allegedly, we know that wasn't real. Again, it's all covered in the book, but Yuri Gagarin's space flight was a hoax. There's a picture in the book of an actual newspaper headline, an American newspaper. I can't remember which one it was, but it's there in the book, and it says "Gagarin space flight a hoax" is the headline. And I mean, there's a whole backstory to it was supposed to be a space race, but it wasn't. They were colluding with each other all the time, and again, we present evidence for that in the book. That's the one.
That's it. So you're saying the evidence in the book is that the U.S. and the Soviets were kind of back and forth, like behind the scenes.
That's right. And what happened was the Americans decided to allow the Russians to claim the first man in space, and in return for that, plus a whole lot of hundreds of thousands of tons of grain, which was sent to the USSR, which was the country at that time. It was a conglomeration of a lot of different East European countries. That's now split up since the end of the Cold War. But yeah, the USA sent lots and lots of aid to the USSR, and in return for that, plus them being allowed to claim the first man in space, they allowed the Americans to claim the first man on the moon. Simple as. Again, lots of evidence for that, all in the book. I don't want to go into too much detail about it. A, because I can't remember it all, and B, because it would be quite boring for everyone.
Wow. So this was kind of a back and forth, like an arrangement.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But, yeah. So, but this is all happening with around Kennedy, Johnson, the 60s turmoil and all that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, Kennedy actually stated in a speech, I think most people are aware of this, but I'll say it anyway. Kennedy actually stated in a speech in about, I think it was in 1961 or 2, that the aim was to get a man on the moon by the end of the decade. And of course, they managed that, allegedly. Hello? Is it?
I can't share anything.
Carrie, sorry, I was muted. It carries on after Kennedy's killed on November 22nd, 1963, with Johnson too. So Johnson carries on this so-called program to get to the moon, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, obviously it was.
Right. Sorry. So the first one is an 11 too. So it's Apollo 11. There's all these tests and sending and all this stuff, and then there's also suspicious deaths around all these people too, right? Like,
yeah, Yeah, I feel like I'm hogging the thing, Alastair. Do you want to go in on that one, or do you want me to carry on?
Answer that one. Yes, there was Gus Grissom who spoke out about the failures of the Apollo, the Saturn V rocket, and all the communication systems, and he was calling NASA out on the inadequacies of the whole project, and he actually invited the press to the Saturn V rocket, and he hung a lemon on a coat hanger on the door of the capsule to say it. And he said the Russians are miles ahead of us, and how are we ever going to get to the moon if we can't even communicate between buildings? Because there was a communications failure on a test, and all of a sudden there's a mysterious fire, and Chaffee, White, and Grissom were burnt to death. And it just seems too much of a coincidence that because that one man spoke out so much against NASA, that it was almost like he was eliminated. And there were other similar stories as well. There was Thomas Barron, who did a complete report. He did an inspection of the whole Apollo mission, and he criticized it totally, the whole show. And mysteriously, he and his family were killed crossing a rail track by a train within a week of his report coming out, and then his report disappears. It's just the usual story.
Right.
And then, of course, we've listed them in the book. There were quite a lot of astronauts or would-be astronauts that died in very suspicious circumstances. In fact, far too many for it to be a coincidence. There were road crashes, air crashes, you name it. But some of the more prominent astronauts that hadn't actually been into space yet were actually killed in a series of, shall I say, unrelated accidents. Haha.
Supposedly unrelated, right?
Supposedly unrelated accident. Absolutely. Yeah. So we list all those and the circumstances. And really, it's for the reader to make their own mind up. But I think what can't speak can't lie, and it's the evidence is there right before our eyes. So yeah, there was a lot of unexplained deaths, as there was. I know it's off topic, but as there was with the Kennedy assassination as well. That was very similar. I wrote a book about the Kennedy assassination as well, and I discovered that there were at least 200 that we know about. People who died in very strange circumstances who were connected to the Kennedy assassination in some way, either as a witness or as part of the plot, who died in very similar suspicious circumstances, at least 200.
Yeah, no, it's astonishing. And the killings went all the way into the 70s too. Like
That's
once
right.
they started investigating it in the House Urban, night 70s.
So that's a kind of the reason I mention that is William, is because that's a kind of a common modus operandi, isn't it? It's the way the way they roll. Yeah.
Oh, it happens here all the time. It's very common in the United States, believe it or not. These killings and cover-ups. Sadly, the sad truth. But it's also in this environment. Like, how could they keep this secret for so long? Because the school. I mean, imagine what it's like to be an American, where you grew up with the Apollo 11 rocket. You're told in school and your textbooks all the time, you've got these heroes, Armstrong, you've got this video, you have all these other people backing it up. Arthur C. Clarke is involved. Like, it's really incredible when you look at it. Like, how could they all create this environment where they convinced the entire public and then kept the lie going all the way to the present?
Yeah. Well, I think that, people say to me on occasions when I talk about this in public, how could they, the exact same question, how could they keep all this secret when there's so many people involved, thousands and thousands of people involved? Well, the trick is it's compartmentalization. All the employees at NASA and all the different offshoots of NASA, in Houston and California, where the computer programmers were based, they're all isolated from the others, and they only see a tiny little piece of the jigsaw. So it's quite an easy process to actually keep them in the dark as to what else is going on. And the two, three, four elements of them, however many there were, never got to talk to each other. So that's how it was done. And this is not not something that's peculiar to the moon landings hoax. This is how all of the hoaxes, and there are many of them, as I'm sure most people know, are perpetrated. It's compartmentalization. And plus the fact, if there anybody ever dare whistleblow, and I'll tell you, if you do whistleblow in these circumstances, you are risking your life. You know, if you're involved in something like the moon landings and you whistleblow, you are risking your life. So that's another way that these people are kept in control. And the other thing is, where would they go with that information? The mainstream media is very powerful, but they wouldn't touch a story like that. You know, and the only outlet that people have is such as this podcast, William, and hundreds of other podcasts around the world. But that is like a pinprick on the back of an elephant. You know, compared to the mainstream media, you know, it's just a tiny percentage audience. So even if a whistleblower did risk it and go to the alternative media, such as yourself, and spill the beans, then, you know, it has very little overall impact on the actual truth. So, yeah, it's easy to do.
It's so what they compartmentalize people, the Manhattan Project and MK Ultra, what you mentioned in your book. These are all compartmentalized. So people who are involved at a smaller level, or somebody involved at one university, they don't see the overarching design. They don't see the grand blueprint, and I think that's what happens at NASA.
Yeah.
Alastair, would you like to talk?
Yes, the one of the big arguments by the people who accept the Apollo missions as they've been told is how could 400,000 people keep it secret for so long? As John just said, it's compartmentalized. But if you look back to the Manhattan Project and 130,000 people involved, only 8 people knew what the project was about, building the bomb. So, and they kept that secret for years. So it is possible. It's definitely possible.
Yeah, there's no question about it. It's 100% possible. But why? What's the agenda? Why would they want to just go through this massive fraud?
Well, at the time, Nixon's greatest fear was not China or Russia. It was the civil unrest in America, which was very prominent at the time and prolific because of the Vietnam War. And I think he wanted to restore some national pride and put some sort of faith back into the government. And what better way to do it with this massive achievement of the first man on the moon, allegedly. And so the national pride came back for Americans rather than concentrating on the Vietnam War and all the deaths there. That's probably the most likely reason.
Yeah, there's no doubt it was used as a deflection from the news in Vietnam, especially, you know, and again, we detail that in the book, all the different missions, all the different Apollo missions, all coincided with news about Vietnam that the public probably were not going to be too enamored with. I mean, there were, obviously in the late 60s and early 70s, there were lots of Vietnam protests going on in the States, as well as in Europe, but not to the same extent, obviously. But so a lot of it was deflection from Vietnam. And again, that's all fully explained in the books. But as Neil said, as Alistair said, it was national prestige. That was a big part of it as well.
Right. The great parades and getting all 3 guys to go through New York City, and just the fanfare and spectacle of the whole thing is really something else. Just a big psyop. Like just an incredible, colossal psyop. I mean, to think that they pulled that off, for me, is absolutely incredible. And what's the Stanley Kubrick connection? Will one of you guys address that?
John, that was your field. That was.
Oh, is it right? Okay. Yeah. Well, Stanley Kubrick was the guy that directed all the films. Yeah. I mean, again, he used exactly the same techniques as he had in his film. It's a blockbuster film, 2001: A Space Odyssey. You know, people have examined the photographs and the films, you know, the film footage, and they've come to the conclusion that he used exactly the same techniques as he did in producing that film. And it's also believed that he was given a free rein financially with that film because of, you know, Hollywood and NASA very strongly linked, as most things are. they knew that that was going to be his job as well, to actually fake the moon landings. And he used something called front screen projection, which I believe he devised, and which was a very new thing in cinema at that time. And there's lots and lots of evidence in the films, as grainy and as difficult to see as they are, that he actually used the same techniques.
Wow. Have you ever seen the picture of him, Clark, and Mueller from NASA together? It's really incredible. There's a picture of Clark. And one of the interesting things about Arthur C. Clarke is he was involved in these landing. He was kind of like the influencer facilitator for this. So he would be on TV talking about the landings. And here he is writing 2001: A Space Odyssey with Kubrick, like the overlaps. And he's also, I think he's a confirmed member of NAMBLA and a Mason. Like, he knows all of the Illuminati numerology and all that stuff. It's in his books.
Sure.
And it's just the overlapping. Let me see if I can find that picture of those two together. But the fact that these are overlapping, and then because they used to call, I think it was in London, whatever studio, I always forget the name of the studio that Kubrick was just doing 2001.
Elf Street.
They called it NASA East. Like, that's
right. Yeah.
Like, I mean, the overlaps are just boggle the mind. And then Kubrick becomes kind of the shut-in after this. Like, he's afraid of something or something. Like, he undergoes this kind of strange change.
He died in very strange circumstances as well. And it was to do with this film. I don't know how connected it was to NASA or the moon landings it was at all, but he died. And somebody did the numerology, and I can't remember it all. But it was a certain number of days after the release of, was his last film, Eyes Wide Shut?
Yeah,
and he had a big argument with the directors of the film, and he was actually, well, we believe he was murdered, and there's no absolute evidence for it, but there's strong circumstantial evidence for the fact that he was actually murdered a certain number of days after the film was released. So, and I can't remember the details. Again, it's all in the book. I'm sorry, I can't remember it off the top of my head. But yeah, it's all a big coincidence, of course.
Right. It's a seeming coincidence. That's really what it is.
Yeah.
Here's a question from Holly. Was Nixon aware of the fraud? What do you guys think?
Definitely.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it couldn't have not been, if that makes sense. He was involved up to his eyeballs in it all. Of course, he was. Yeah.
And Nixon's record wasn't exactly one of honesty, anyway, was it? If you look at his history. But he would have had the ultimate say on it, I would imagine.
Yeah. I mean, obviously it was Johnson, wasn't it, at the time of the moon landings? But Nixon was shortly afterwards, anyway. And he was president for some of the later missions, but not for the original. They're not for the original ones.
Right. Here's the picture. Let me see if I can bring this up. This is a remarkable picture. This is a picture of Clark, and these guys are all, there's Clark and Kubrick, and the guy on the far right is a guy from NASA. His name is Mueller.
Oh, yes, I have seen that picture. Yeah.
And I think that's in outside of London.
It's in London. Yeah, it's in London. Yeah.
So I think that's 1965 or something. It really is extraordinary that these guys were like, this is happening around there, and Clark is really there. So, Local Squatch asks, they can't get past the Van Allen belt. You guys address that in the book, and one of you guys address that?
Go on, Neil. I was so sorry. I kept calling you Neil.
Definitely, probably one of the most prominent reasons that they never went to the moon. They just cannot get to the radiation belts. I can't remember the exact guy's name, Sergei something or other. The Russian, he was the head of the Russian space agency, and he said you just cannot go beyond Earth's geomagnetic field. Once you hit the Van Allen belts, you're just radiated, and it is fatal. And NASA over the years have admitted it sort of now and again. They've let it slip that it's not possible because it would just be fatal. So that is a definite reason that they haven't been to the moon, that they just cannot get through those radiation belts.
Wasn't the Van Allen belt a fairly recent discovery at that time too? Like they didn't really know it until the 50s or 60s. Is that correct?
Late 50s, yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like the radiation. It's not like what you get in a microwave. It's something like so strong that it would turn a human person into like a slice
Yeah.
of bacon. Like it would just liquefy your water, the H2O.
I think the most powerful part of radiation in it, there's loads of different types of radiation, but I think gamma rays, which the Apollo fans say there's no gamma rays in it, there are. And that's the most lethal aspect of the radiation in the belts. Yeah.
Could I just jump in and say that James Van Allen himself actually admitted at one point in the 70s that, in the 60s, that it was impossible to pass through them for a human being. But he very quickly changed his mind for some strange reason. Again, just a coincidence, nothing to worry about.
A lot of that happens. A lot of strange changes in mind, deaths, intimidation, all those things. Tim is asking, I could understand faking it once, but over and over again, the rockets sure launched. Did they orbit the moon or what? Surely Russia, China would have been able to discern such trickery. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I'll jump in there again. Yeah, I mean, China and Russia were in cahoots, with the US. And there's no doubt that, in fact, that every space agency in the world is controlled through NASA. So there is no opposition as such. They will just go along with the script, basically. So yeah, I mean, the reason that they did it over and over again, as I covered earlier, was because of the Vietnam War going on. They used it as a cover over certain incidents that were happening in Vietnam to deflect the news away. Anybody who's ever seen the Dustin Hoffman, Robert De Niro film, Wag the Dog, will understand exactly what I mean, because that is exactly the premise of that film. And I would recommend anybody watching it if they've not seen it, because it's a very good film, B, it's very funny, and C, most importantly, it's very, very true what goes on. So
another interesting film kind of pertains to the faked moon landings is called Capricorn 1, which is a pretty good thriller. Like it's pretty, and it kind of rhymes with a lot of what's going on, the staging and the need for quiet, and the astronauts who didn't go along with it. Like it's like Capricorn. I don't want to ruin it, but it is interesting. And then you have this secret kind of like deep state operative telling them what's going on. Like this is why it's happening. And one of the interesting things, the moon landing that I'll never get over is like watching these guys come back from the first so-called moon landing. They look like they just lost like the World Series or something. They look so depressed or whatever. They do not look like happy campers. They're not smiling at all. And Armstrong, I mean, these are body language experts to be like, these guys do not look happy. So there's some tells there.
There's a chat where we analyze that from a psychological point of view. I've got a degree in psychology, for what that's worth, next to nothing really, but I've got a degree in psychology, and we analyze all through, the entirety of of that press conference after the Apollo 11 landing, and I think we do a pretty good job of it, even though we say so ourselves. But honestly, they were not people who had just performed one of the greatest ever achievements of mankind. There is absolutely no way on this earth that was, or off this earth, that was the case. So
I was just going to mention that, further to what John said earlier, there were more Apollo missions to the moon allegedly planned, but as soon as the Vietnam War was over, bang, they stopped the Apollo missions.
Wow, so that's the exact thing. So 1974, and then they lost all the telemetry data too, right? Like there's no proof of getting there. It's almost funny, like, and also like when you look at the pictures, like you include the lander on there, it looks like something I would make in my garage.
Yeah,
it looks, if you really analyze it, it looks ridiculous, right?
Yeah, go ahead. I've actually been to the NASA museum at Cape Canaveral, or Cape Kennedy, whatever it's called, this week, and the moon lander, honestly, it's unbelievable. You stand, I stood within 10 feet of it, and I mean, there's no way on earth that thing went to them anywhere near the moon. I'm absolutely convinced. And that was even before I realized that, that it was all a big hoax. I just looked at it and I thought, nah, no way, so yeah.
It's really incredible. And like one of the most amusing things too is when they like the fifth or sixth landing, when they got the dune buggy out.
Sorry for laughing, but honestly.
No, it's actually, but like we believed all that stuff. And then it was supposed to be like underneath the lander and then shot.
A fold up car, yeah.
Yeah.
And for what
NASA actually came out and said, we designed it so cleverly that it was built to fit into a suitcase.
Wow, yeah.
This has been a hell of a big suitcase. That's all.
Just whopper lies, just incredible stuff. And so they're faking this. Do you think that they're actual rockets? Like, do they just go circumnavigate the globe, or like they're shooting something up into space, right?
And that's very convincing. When people are standing to witness the takeoffs, it must be extremely convincing to see this massive, powerful rocket taking off. But it's our belief that the Bermuda Triangle, which was more or less emphasized in the 50s to create an area of no air traffic, no nautical traffic, so they had a nice little landing spot for those rockets. And indeed, the Russians have actually found one of the capsules floating around in the Bay of Biscay after it had gone across the Atlantic, and they secretly gave it back to the American officials in Murmansk, in a port in northern Russia. They arranged a rendezvous and they handed back this capsule to them.
Yeah, and just to add to that, Alastair, somebody, and I can't remember the guy's name now, did some research on the Bermuda Triangle itself, comparing it to other sea and ocean areas throughout the world, and statistically, it is no different as regards disappearances, etc. Statistically, no different at all. It was just hyped up to be a dangerous area to be in, and it still is to this day to a certain extent, because, as Alastair said, they wanted as few people in that area as possible, because they didn't want anybody looking or viewing what happened to the rockets after they took off. If you notice, they don't go straight up. They kind of go in an arc like that. And when you ask NASA about this, they actually say, "Oh yeah, they use a gravity well." This is their words. I haven't got a clue what they mean. They use a gravity well to slingshot it out of the Earth's atmosphere, which doesn't sound very plausible to me. But there you go. What do I know? I'm just a conspiracy theorist.
Right, but then you have to see the vastness of this fraud. The fake rocks that are supposedly from the moon, the dropping of the capsule. How does this happen? Like they orchestrated all this stuff is really incredible. Like, haven't you guys studied the rocks and like how did they drop the capsule? Can you talk about that?
Yeah. Alastair, do you want to do that?
Yeah, that's addressed in the book. There is a chapter on the capsules coming back to Earth, and it has actually been photographed of a Hercules C-130 aircraft flying extremely high and pushing out the capsule from the back cargo door. So that looks like the source. And there was a situation where I think a pilot of a trans-Pacific airliner was said he actually saw this happening, and the passengers witnessed it as well. So, it just adds to the suspicion, doesn't it?
Right. It just keeps it under scrutiny. Almost all the stories surrounding the landings, like, are seen as frauds. Like even the Nixon phone call. Somebody in the chat's mentioning Nixon, but like he gets on the phone and he's talking to like somebody next door almost. Like there's no delay. Like how many miles is it to the moon? It's like 93,000 or something. I don't know.
35,000 miles, and just a straight through phone call. Yeah.
There should have been at least a 2-second delay, but there never was.
Right. So he's in on it. He was in on a lot of stuff. I mean, but this is one of them. It is. It's really one of the. It's really. I mean, the consequences of this kind of fraud are immense. Because I mean, have you guys? Did you guys calculate like the total expenditure from the '60s to the present on NASA? Because that would mean that these are just gigantic sums of money, a massive wealth transference out of the public, fisc, out of the fiscal uh, amount of what people are paying taxes for, right?
Yeah, you're looking at over $1.8 trillion, which is a vast sum. People think it kind of conflate trillion and billion. Oh, yeah, it's a similar figure, but without really thinking about it too deeply. But absolutely not. A trillion is just a huge number. So yeah, it's into the trillions of dollars. Absolutely.
There's your incentive too, right? So people say, why would they do this? Why would they keep doing it? That money gets put into businesses, homes, all kinds of stuff like Vanguard.
Back pockets.
Yeah, back pockets. I mean, it's just, it is, the tax base here in this country is just one giant wealth transfer and scam out of the American public into different hands, like masonry or who knows. You got to laugh at the extraordinary enormity of it all. It's just absolutely crazy.
Yeah, I mean, you do have to laugh.
It's a shame that so many people will just accept what the authorities tell them. When it's been proved time and time again, the governments absolutely lie to the people. And this is just another example. This is one of their biggest examples. But 9/11 was another one. Donald Rumsfeld announced the day before 9/11 that they misplaced $3 trillion, I think it was. Now, there would have been a hell of an uprising about that. The next thing, 9/11, bingo, everybody's concentrating on that. Just too much of a coincidence.
That's another thing. There are parallels between NASA and the Department of Defense, because if anybody does an audit of the Department of Defense, they suddenly have car crashes, suicides, and lonesome old motels, family annihilation things, weird things happen to anybody who touches those budgets. And I think when Rumsfeld on September 10th said it was 2.3 trillion, which is even a weird occult number too, if you look at the 23 Enigma.
Yeah, an interesting fact about that, William. I know we're getting off the topic slightly, but I'll just say this, that people may not be aware of. But where did the alleged plane that hit the Pentagon crash? It crashed into the audit department and killed 120 auditors that were actually looking for the $2.3 trillion that had allegedly gone missing.
Right. Yeah, no, it's just an incredible, it's just a long, string of fraud against the American people. It's really amazing. And the space rocks were tested. From my understanding, I remember reading a story that one of the so-called moon rocks ended up in Europe. And then it was just, somebody said, well, let's test it out. And it was like, this came from a desert, right? Wasn't it some, did you guys know that story?
Wood. Yeah, it's a piece of wood.
That was given to, I think it was in the Netherlands, to the mayor of the town they were visiting. And it stayed in its glass box for years. And then somebody took it for analysis and it was petrified wood, just a bit of old rotting wood. But but the space rocks, which is one of the biggest arguments by the people who believe in the Apollo missions, well, we've got the moon rocks, they must have been to the moon. Well, a remote-controlled probe could have picked them up, so that's not indicative of man being on the moon. But B, I think it was in 1967, strangely enough, Werner von Braun went to the Antarctic, which is the biggest source of moon rocks on Earth, because when, say, a meteorite hits the moon and splinters come off, and they land all over Earth, but mostly in the Antarctic for some strange reason. And it's the biggest source of moon rocks on Earth. And he collected vast quantities of samples and had them shipped back in a Hercules C-130. And next thing, they've got moon rocks allegedly from the moon. It's just, again, another too much of a coincidence.
Right, that's right. And for some people who are pro moon landing, say that you can get a telescope now and see kind of evidence of something being on the moon. Have you ever heard that argument?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, but it's absolutely false. That's not true. Again, there are pictures in the book that we've put in there that show that the pictures that they purport to show the moon landing area in the Sea of Tranquility, the first one anyway, it just doesn't show anything of the kind. It's impossible to discern what what those tiny little dots, and that's all they are, just tiny little dots. It's impossible to discern exactly what they are. And on a similar topic, William, they all the NASA fanboys also say, and girls also say things like, they're firing lasers to the moon, and they can they can actually get the what am I trying to say here? Sorry, my brain's gone. Yeah, they can actually send a laser to the moon to detect. No, I'm talking nonsense now.
No, but there's like something you can laser to the moon, and then it bounces back, and that somehow proves that there's evidence that something's been there.
That's right. But we've proven in the book, using, we've spoken to scientists, we've spoken to experts on, the fraud. We've put proof in the book that it's impossible to send a laser with current technology to the moon and have it still of a size that is going to do anything that lasers normally do. The beam, even though it is a laser, would have spread out for many, many miles by the time it hits the moon. So it just proves nothing at all.
Right. And I think there was another researcher from Italy who was like a cinematographer. I don't know if it's in your book because I didn't get all the way through it, but they proved that some of these shadowings and the backgrounds are fake. They're provably fake. Like there should be tons of stars, right? Because there's no atmosphere on the moon, right?
Yeah. Well, the reason I believe that the pictures never show stars is because they don't want us to see the constellations from the moon, because some clever person would actually, some amateur astronomer would, actually analyze those pictures and say that even though we're talking about tiny distances overall, over a vast distance, even so, the stars will be in a slightly different position, or they should be, from the moon as to what they are from the Earth. So yeah, that's another anomaly, and there are hundreds of them.
Yeah, there should be some variance, right? Because you're 35,000 miles away.
Very tiny one, but yeah.
Here's what Daddy Stab says: the astronauts left metal plates on the moon. We bounced lasers off to measure the moon's recession away from the Earth. That's the one, the specific thing that I was talking about.
Did I answer that one?
Please do.
Yeah,
please do.
John has just more or less answered that one, but just a little bit more detail. They allege that the astronauts left lunar laser reflectors on the moon on each mission, and they can shine a laser from the Earth to these reflectors, and it comes back, and they can measure the distance from the moon to the Earth, and they can see how far the moon is moving away from the Earth every year, which is, I think it's under a centimeter every year, they allege. So what the Apollo fans are saying is that, well, man must have been to the moon to put the laser reflectors. However, they discovered in 1962 in, I think it was the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, that they could actually shine a laser to the moon and it would bounce back off the surface and give just as an accurate reading as if there was a reflector there. And a leading Swiss laser specialist called Andreas Markey, who actually we consulted, and he gave us lots of information on that. And he's done his own experiments, and he has shone a laser to the moon's surface and back and measured all the photons, and he's sent it to where the alleged lunar reflectors are and measured the photons there, and he said there was no difference at all. So it's not proof at all.
It's not proof, yeah. So this is, well, supposedly Daddy Stab studied at Ohio State University. I'm not sure. We use these yearly. You have a fan, John. George says John Hamer's awesome.
Thank you, George.
And then Heitzman, the wealth transfer is a tale as old as time. Even the rich get scammed. Yeah, I think you're right. The stars not showing were due to the type of camera used. That's another argument. Do you guys want to address that? One of you?
I'm not a photographic expert, but we certainly consulted a photographic expert. And she is adamant about that there should be stars in the pictures no matter what. So, this guy, fine, that's his opinion, but certainly not the opinion of our 30-year experienced photographic expert.
Gotcha. Here's another one. Robin asks, how are they breathing when they're on the moon? Did they have little air tanks? Any questions on that? Any you guys want to address that?
They had a personal life support system. It was called PLSS, and it took, when they breathed out, it sort of recycled the thing, and with an accompaniment of oxygen, and it allegedly gave them the air to breathe. But some of the EVAs, the extra vehicle activity as they call them, the moonwalks, they went on for hours, and it does create doubt as to whether it was possible.
Right. Yeah, the battery power that would have been required was just phenomenal. Everything would have been battery driven. Obviously, there's no mains electricity on the moon. Well, not the last time I checked, anyway. And the battery power would have been immense. It just doesn't compute at all.
Right, it doesn't add up. One of my favorites of like the we didn't go to the moon videos is when the lander takes off and the camera zooms as the thing takes off. So somebody's on the moon zooming it perfectly, or they had such advanced technology that it could actually, figure out to follow or pan while the lander's taking off.
Yeah, and by the way, that ridiculous contraption that left the moon on those alleged occasions had to rendezvous with the mothercraft that was allegedly orbiting the moon, going at a speed of 4,000 miles an hour.
Incredible.
Okay, yeah, we believe that.
Absolutely incredible. 1024 Hope. Have you guys ever heard of Professor Robert Foster, an Australian, claiming the moon is made of plasma, therefore the moon landing was hope? When do you guys want to address that?
Yeah, I mean, I saw that video actually last week, but I'd seen it years before and forgotten about it. But I actually saw that last week. Very interesting guy. I don't know what to make of it, to be honest. But I don't believe that outer space is exactly what they tell us. I think there's some major chicanery going on when they tell us about the universe and its composition and all the rest of it. So yeah, I wouldn't dismiss that. I don't know the answer. I could be totally wrong, but I definitely wouldn't dismiss it.
There's something holding the form together. Space isn't space. Like there's things having to be holding these celestial bodies in some form of stasis.
They tell us it's gravity, but I'm not so sure about that. I'm a bit of a gravity skeptic. I don't believe gravity is what they tell us. I mean, gravity was allegedly discovered by a guy by the name of Isaac Newton, who was allegedly a British scientist. But when you look into his background, he wasn't even a scientist. He was an alchemist. Okay, so he was a pseudo-scientist, but he was absolutely lauded and feted for the fact that he discovered gravity, because he was lying beside this pond, snoozing in the afternoon sunshine, and an apple fell on his head. This is how the story goes, and he had a sudden eureka moment, and he said, and he came up with this idea that gravity is the force that drags things downwards. Well, I don't really buy that at all. I think gravity is very, very simple. There's something called Occam's razor, which states that the simplest explanation is usually the truth. Not always, but usually. And the simplest explanation for that phenomenon of things falling to the ground is simply relative density. Apples are relatively denser than air, so they fall. if the apple had landed in the pond it was lying beside, it would have floated. Why? Because apples are less dense than water, but they're denser than air. So again, you can apply that to lots and lots of things. Gravity is, I would, anybody who's skeptical about that, what I've just said, I would urge them to actually look it up. I mentioned it, I talk about gravity in detail in my book, The Falsification of Science. But yeah, if you're interested, do some research on it, because it's not what they tell us, I don't think. My opinion. But, you know.
And gravity is a theory which has never actually been proved.
Yeah. Isaac Newton wrote a book called Principia Mathematica, which purported to explain gravity. And it began with a tiny little word, and that word was if, which for me negated the whole massive tome, 3 volumes of about that thickness, to try to explain the phenomenon of gravity. It's just nonsense. Nonsense.
Interesting. Sadie asks, why did no other country send people to the moon? You would think they would have been more competitive. You guys want to address that?
Perhaps because they know they can't. You know, it's only America that will pull stunts like this, I think. Who are the greatest filmmakers in the world? The Americans. That's without doubt. And they can create the illusion of reality, just about. But it's not quite perfect. So, but no, I don't. Just to answer the previous question, no. The previous question said, do we think that they can actually go to the moon? And no, they can't. For a host of reasons, the principal one being the Van Allen radiation belts. They just wouldn't survive transversing the radiation belts. So no, they can't. Not humans.
Right. They would have to be in some like container with like metal so thick, like it just like this thing that they say they went to the moon with is like, it's like made out of aluminum foil or something.
Yeah,
it's just too much. Yeah.
Same thickness as a Coca-Cola tin, aluminium. I mean, that's not going to affect anything.
All right, last question. Daddy Steps, wouldn't Russia have called out our lie? They were monitoring. How many thousands of people NASA would have to perfectly keep the secret all these decades? We kind of addressed that already in the earlier discussion, but
with the other question, they said they're monitoring. I think that refers to the age-old argument of tracking, and this is actually new evidence which we brought in the book about the tracking. People said, "Oh, they tracked them all the way to the moon and all the way back." Well, that is addressed in the book. It's new evidence, so I do urge people to read that, because it answers that specific question about the tracking. That can easily be falsified, and it was. So, but it is in the book.
Yeah, there's a lot in here. It's 447 pages, all footnoted, tons of information. We are at the hour mark, guys. Is there anything else you'd like to add, or anything I missed before we wrap it up?
The only thing I want to add is, apart from the new evidence of the tracking, there's also new evidence on the position of the moon relative to where the astronauts are standing. And I think it's only one actual photograph showing an astronaut on the moon in the background, and that the way it's portrayed, it's totally wrong. It's impossible. So that's the only thing I'd add.
Yeah, I can't add anything to that, William. I think that just kind of wraps it up nicely, you know.
Great talk, guys. Thanks so much. And this is your website, John, so people can contact John through this. I'll put a link to it, falsificationofhistory.co.uk. And you can see his other books there. You can also see the other interviews we did. Like I said at the beginning, this is our 6th episode, and our first one started back in 2019. So it's been quite some time, but great job on the book, and a lot of great information and expertly researched and well put together, written. I think you said Shannon Rowan helped you with it. So
she did.
That's great. Yeah.
She's a very knowledgeable lady, very knowledgeable on lots of topics. Yeah.
Much like you guys. So
thank you.
Thank you very much for your time. Again, the authors are John Hamer and Alastair Neil. It's Hamer and then Neil. And again, the new book is One Giant Lie to Mankind, the Untold Story of the Apollo Missions. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
All right, stay there. Stay there.